New York City. Some people love it, others wouldn't visit even if you paid them.
I don't want to go to New York City.
Why not?
New York is a hellhole.
Yet there are few places more polarizing to tourists. Today, we'll be sharing 12 reasons why people hate visiting New York City. You don't want to miss it. It's expensive. This is actually one of the reasons on the list that I most understand from the tourist perspective. We said this in a previous video about increasing hotel prices. I put Times Square into Booking.com first week of August. Cheapest hotel, $140 a night. We haven't added the 14% tax per night, as well as a $35 a night resort fee. So you're paying almost $200 a night to stay in one of the most congested areas in the United States. And while you could survive on cheap eats alone, and we have made tons of videos on the topic, your average tourist, they're going to a mid-range restaurant, 3 courses for 2, is gonna run you about $100. There is an insane sticker shock in New York City, and unlike in some other destinations, you can't just run away from Midtown. It's all over the city. Attractions add up too. The cheapest observation deck in New York City, $34 to go to Summit OV, and that doesn't count taking the elevator to the top. And if you think you're saving big getting one of those sightseeing passes, the lowest price one is $139 for 1 day. Now let's pretend you've brought along 2 or 3 kids, but I understand the complaint about New York City being expensive because it's true. Crime. This is a big reason that some people are not visiting New York City right now. And even though it's nowhere near the insane levels it was in the 1970s and 1980s, the crime stats are moving up. There's a certain amount of situational awareness that you need as a tourist or a local here on a day-to-day basis. And for many, the idea of a vacation doesn't involve looking around to make sure a mentally unstable person doesn't harass you. I think that increased crimes on the subway, as well as all the media attention around that, is one of the big reasons that ridership isn't even back to 60% of the pre-pandemic levels. The weather. It's May 7th right now, 47 degrees with a real feel of 40 due to 23-mile-an-hour winds. There's a lot of tourists who stay away from New York, especially in the winter, because it's too cold, or they just don't like the unpredictability of visiting a place that could be super hot and humid in the summer, cold and rainy almost any time of year. You know, people that say they had a bad trip due to inclement weather, a lot of that is just not planning enough, not understanding how windy it can get here if you're coming from a warmer climate, not having winter boots ready, and stepping into one of the beautiful slushy puddles of Manhattan after a winter storm, even days after a winter storm. These are the kinds of things I hear from tourists where they say, yeah, it was too cold, never again. It's dirty. We mentioned the subway, and we even dedicated an entire video on the channel to visiting New York's worst subway stations, and we saw things that we can never unsee. I don't think it gets much grosser than riding in New York City's subway on a daily basis. I'll never forget the time I saw a tourist scream when a rat was walking along the platform like it belonged there. But an equally big eyesore in the city are overflowing garbages, or better yet, seeing tons of garbage bags on the sidewalk. I've got good news for you. Mayor Adams has just piloted a program using revolutionary technology from the Far East. It's called having extra dumpsters on the streets. Hopefully that helps New York's image a little bit, because it's gonna need a lot more than that to clean up the dirty image that many tourists have of New York. The crowds. Now, I don't know when New York is gonna return to those pre-pandemic days when Midtown was an absolute zoo, hard to walk. It may never return to exactly how it was. Because if you're not gonna complain about crowds on the streets, what you will complain about are the long lines and the crowds at the attractions, which are picking up right now. I'm curious how busy New York City is gonna be for tourism this summer. I predict quite busy, and spending hours and hours waiting in lines is going to give you the impression that New York is just too crowded and too congested. If your itinerary is just full of tourist stuff, then you also wouldn't like Las Vegas or Disney World either. It's smelly. Well, that kind of goes hand in hand with the dirty part, but we're not talking about the pleasant smells of the only olfactory art gallery in the world located in Chinatown, which we just showed on our last Hidden Gems video. No. Talking about some of those lovely summer smells on the streets. Or better yet, walking onto an empty subway car and discovering why nobody else is on it. Those kinds of smells. Yes, New York is a smelly place, and I don't know if that's ever gonna change. Noise pollution. Forget traffic and taxis honking. That's nothing these days. We've got the kids riding around the city on the ATVs and the dirt bikes. And if that's not enough, I've read some hilarious reviews on TripAdvisor about people picking the wrong side of a hotel, facing a busy street, and some of the issues that they ran into. We got room 202 located on the second floor facing a street, which means we're unable to sleep both days we stayed there. Noise, cars horning all night, people passing by talking, screaming, and a whole more. A truly nightmare. This is actually something that native New Yorkers and longtime residents take for granted, their immunity to almost all types of noise. When you're coming from small town America or small town Europe, noise is naturally gonna be one of your complaints, and I'm not surprised to hear about this so often. I understand why tourists like to throw shade at the New York City area airports because it's pretty tough to get to Midtown Manhattan in under an hour from any of them. I remember traveling to Amsterdam and the train station was nicely connected to the airport. We got to central Amsterdam in like 20 minutes. From the New York City area airports, much tougher. We'll start with JFK, where you've got to take an air train, and depending on what terminal you arrive at, that's gonna add a lot of extra time. Knowing to take the LIRR from JFK Airport if you're staying in Midtown, absolutely one of the best cheap methods of getting there without much delay. And then Ubers and taxis, I mean, the prices are surging like crazy right now for Ubers. I'm hearing this time and time again from locals as well, how expensive it is to use a ride-sharing app where taxis are actually cheaper a lot of times. And then LaGuardia Airport, I just arrived on a busy holiday weekend. It was impossible to get a lift, and all the Ubers were over $100 to go even 20 minutes to Brooklyn. We had to wait in line 30 minutes just to get a taxi. And even in Newark, you still have to take an air train to get to New Jersey Transit, and that train could be packed to the brim where you don't even get a seat. And of course, you might accidentally step out into Newark Penn Station instead of New York Penn Station. All these potential travel headaches from the area airports can leave a sour taste in some tourist's mouth. I completely understand this. While New York is not on LA's level, if you want to use ride shares or taxis your entire trip to avoid taking the subway, you could run into some fun experiences. A lot of times it's faster to take an express train than it would be to take an Uber or a Lyft anywhere in Manhattan. I've heard from tourists how much time they've had to spend in traffic, Ubering from one spot to another. My best advice for you is if you come from somewhere where you almost never walk and you drive everywhere, practice your walking before you come. It could save you a lot of aggravation if your next stop is just a mile away. Rude locals. I can't tell you how many times I've actually heard compliments from travelers about how nice New Yorkers are, but there's still this pervasive image about the rude, gruff local who doesn't want to help you out. The reality is that getting from point A to point B in New York is such an important day-to-day task that most New Yorkers tend to zone out the rest of the world. So if you're trying to stop somebody to give you directions, it might not be that they ignored you, it might just be they didn't hear you, they have their headphones on, they're not paying attention. Where I've seen rude behavior from New Yorkers that I can actually remember is at certain tourist destinations where you have locals who are working there as staff or security and they get asked the same dumb questions over and over again. But I've actually witnessed more rude behavior from tourists than New Yorkers in my many years here. It's a shame that I've had to make 3 separate videos about scams and ripoffs to avoid in New York City, but guess what? That's just the reality. Getting pressured to pay $20 for a CD when you don't even own a CD player anymore, or having a fake monk slap a bracelet on you and paying a ransom for that, yeah, sure, it can put a damper on your trip. The good news is the majority of these scams and tourist traps and ripoffs are in a small little area in Times Square, and staying on your toes is part of the fun of visiting New York City. Lack of bathrooms. This has become particularly bad during COVID-19, as I have still visited spots that say their bathroom is out of order and not open to the public due to the pandemic. But pretty much any public place or restaurant or bar or tourist attraction is gonna have a bathroom. It can take a little work, and I understand the complaint about this, but this is a big city issue anywhere in the world. But it's just one of the many complaints that I've heard about visiting New York City. I get it. If you've never visited New York before, one of our most viewed videos ever on the channel was about 12 things every first timer needs to do when they visit the Big Apple. I still stand by all of these things. If you haven't watched it yet, what are you waiting for? Check this one out.